Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast, YouTube exclusive mini video version. I'm John Macri, and today I'm going over my three favorite Darkhorse quarterbacks to finish as the overall QB1 in fantasy this season. So, these are players that are being drafted outside the top five at their position, according to multiple ADPs. So, no Anthony Richardson, who is QB5 on Underdog, for example. He wouldn't qualify, but true Darkhorse picks based on that ADP criteria, and I'll break them down into who I think has the best shot, medium shot, and a long shot as well. So, first things first, before going over the names, something that I always like to do when writing or talking about this subject is look at our past QB1s and diagnose what made them get to that finish on the year. And for the most part, these quarterbacks are already being drafted among the top five, which was evident the past 3 years with Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Josh Allen again. But in 2020, Josh Allen's first year as QB1, he was being drafted as QB11, so he'd qualify as a dark horse. Then Lamar Jackson in 2019 was also being drafted as QB11, and Patrick Mahomes in 2018 was being drafted as QB15. So there is a history of QB1s being legitimate dark horses. The closest we came last year was when I picked Dak Prescott, who was being drafted in that QB9 to 12 range, depending on the fantasy platform, and he finished as QB4 on the year. So we'll hope to find guys like that this year. So what we're kind of looking for based on our past QB1s is a minimum of 25 points per game. If the quarterback is not an elite passer like Patrick Mahomes, where he threw for over 5,200 yards in 2022, then we also need strong rushing upside. We're looking at about 5 carries per game at a minimum, and then with touchdown upside in there as well. And we need above average accuracy, good pressure to sack conversion rate, and also important, an elite receiving option, likely a 90 plus receiving grade, either for their career or capable of getting there this season. So you can see all this kind of criteria broken down into tables in the free article on pff.com, which I'll link in the description as well. It might not be as clear here on YouTube with that image that I put up. But with all that in mind, starting with our best shot to finish as our dark horse QB1, it's Arizona Cardinals quarterback Kyler Murray, being drafted as QB8 on Sleeper, QB7 on Underdog, and QB9 on ESPN. Obviously, Murray, no stranger to finishing as a top 12 fantasy quarterback, doing so as a rookie and in each of the 2 seasons that followed that. However, due to missed time in 2022 and 2023, it's now been 3 years since his last top 12 finish. I think this season is primed to be his best chance of not only returning to that form, but also potentially back closer to his 2020 form when he finished as the overall QB2. He played in just 8 full games in 2023 and 10 in 2022, but he showcased that high-end fantasy potential with 11 top 12 finishes. That's 61% of his 18 games, while never finishing worse than QB22 in the weeks he played more than just a quarter of the game. So Murray's floor obviously remains high because of his high-end rushing upside. He's averaged 4.5 runs per game last season. That accounted for 5.3 fantasy points per game as a runner, which was 6th best at the position. If he can bounce back as a passer, like, his QB1 potential is probably the best of this group. Again, shortened 2022 and 2023 seasons, those resulted in his 2 lowest passing grades since his rookie year. But there's hope that with a full season, a big upgrade at wide receiver, he can get back to his strong 2020 and 2021 season ranks, where he earned an 86.3 PFF passing grade over those 2 seasons combined, which were also the most productive fantasy years of his career when he had DeAndre Hopkins as his top target. Hopkins earned an 89.9 PFF receiving grade over that span. That was 7th best at the position. But Murray hasn't really had a top receiving option like that since, which includes 2022 DeAndre Hopkins, who just wasn't as effective as he once was by that point. So you got tight end Trey McBride as one of the top options, and the addition of the top wide receiver in the 2024 NFL draft, Marvin Harrison Jr., should provide the perfect combination, I think, of receiving talent to help push Murray over the top as a fantasy asset in 2024. Now, keeping in mind, obviously, the best quarterback options among the top 5 in ADP all pretty much fit that same criteria with at least a better recent track record. But that doesn't mean Murray can't get back there with some help. He already has the history of 20 plus fantasy points per game in prior seasons. His rushing ability hasn't diminished. And with Harrison Jr. addition, that addition along with McBride at tight end, we can see that passing production should be the best it's been since 2021. um, his last two full seasons resulted in over 3,900 passing yards in each and at least 425 rushing yards. Those both ended up being top 12 fantasy finishes for him. His first full season, I think, is going to be this year since 2021, which will hopefully allow everything to come back together once again to potentially top those marks and make him kind of our best candidate for Darkhorse Fantasy QB1 this year. So, just looking at his QB1 checklist, we went over the potential criteria of what we need from our fantasy QB1s. He has the history of a 20 plus fantasy points per game. He has the high end rushing ability. I put borderline for passing ability. He'll need to bounce back a bit there. He has the accuracy marks. And while he might not have one 90 plus receiving grade option, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride together could make up for that, especially if Harrison Jr. hits the ground running like we expect in the NFL. Okay, on to our medium shot. It's Jaden Daniels, rookie quarterback for the Washington Commanders, being drafted as QB 15 on Sleeper, QB 11 on Underdog, and QB 12 on ESPN. He's the number 2 overall pick from the 2024 NFL draft, currently being drafted outside the top 10 at his position. And honestly, if his rookie season goes as expected, that ADP should be considered a discount at this point. Daniels arguably offers the most rushing upside of any player going outside the top 5 at his position. And that was evidenced by his 14% scramble rate in his college career. That's the highest mark among any of the top rushing quarterbacks currently in the NFL. Not only does Daniels offer a high number of rush attempts, though, it's the history of what he can do with the ball in his hands. Being among the best that we've seen coming out of college since 2017. He ranks among the top 95th percentile in his college career, in missed tackles forced per attempt, yards per carry, yards after contact per attempt, and explosive run rate. The biggest question mark for him, and why he probably isn't considered the best shot to finish as QB1 among our dark horse candidates, is that what he can provide as a passer. So his arm strength, obviously one of his defining attributes, but he doesn't quite have the resume passer of some of his peers outside of that 2023 season, right? So last year was his lone college season where he threw for more than 2,800 passing yards and recorded at least an 80 PFF passing grade. So hitting the ground running, I guess, as a passer shouldn't be considered a lock necessarily, but helping his case is Terry McLaurin, who, while not having hit that 90 PFF receiving grade in a single season, his career receiving grade does sit at 89.4, which is a top 20 mark since 2019. So that does at least imply that he has the potential to still reach that mark and basically fits our criteria there. Daniel's rushing ability, though, let's be honest, that's going to be the most significant factor in delivering on his fantasy potential as a dark horse QB1 candidate. Should he also, deliver similarly as a passer as that he was in 2023, that Heisman winning season at LSU, where he earned a 92 passing grade, threw for 3,800 yards, 40 touchdowns, and just 4 interceptions? Then that's the dual threat quarterback necessary to consistently deliver on his fantasy QB1 potential. So looking at his QB1 checklist, obviously doesn't have the history of 20 plus fantasy points per game being a rookie, but we know he does have the elite rushing upside. We're TBD on passing ability, so we'll call it borderline since his 2023 LSU season was very encouraging. Same thing with accuracy. We just don't know what that'll be in the NFL. And with Terry McLaurin right there on the fringe of that 90 plus receiving grade for his career, we have to call that borderline as well. Okay, last one, our long shot, being drafted as QB 23 on Sleeper, QB 21 on Underdog, and QB 21 also on ESPN. It's Cleveland Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson. So Watson managed 3 straight top 5 finishes from 2018 to 2020. But since then, he's been suspended, he's been injured, and his play on the field has been far from his past self. So as a result, being drafted outside the top 20 at his position makes sense. It makes him clearly our longest shot for overall QB1, despite, just as much past fantasy success in his career as our best shot, Kyler Murray, right? So It's basically been between injuries and suspension. He's made just 12 appearances across the past 3 NFL seasons, and he's been unable to regain that pre suspension form that resulted in a top 10 mark in either overall PFF grade or passing grade in 3 straight seasons after his rookie year. So, unfortunately for him, it hasn't just been falling outside the top 10 quarterbacks since his return, but he's been unable to crack the top 25 at his position in either category, right? So I think the encouraging part is that we know Watson can perform to this level based on his history. And then having Amari Cooper as his top receiving option, another one while not owning a 90 plus receiving grade for his career, he's right there as well, 88.7 for his career. The rest of the Browns offense too provides like this high upside ceiling if Kevin Stefanski can unlock the potential of guys like Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore, while Nick Chubb potentially bounces back from injury as well. You got a top five offensive line there. Like Watson has the supporting cast to succeed. He'll just need to bounce back in a big way. But I think part of what can help Watson bounce back and deliver on his past fantasy success is his rushing ability. Even last season, 4.3 runs per game were only slightly lower than his high end fantasy season's average, which was 4.9. And he ranked top 10 at the position last season. So his 8.8% scramble rate last year, that was a top five mark at the position. So both those things combined resulted in 3.4 rushing fantasy points per game. That was 10th best among quarterbacks. Even with, the poor passing performances and missing like the elite rushing production, he still managed a top 10 fantasy finish in 3 of his 6 games last year and in 5 of his last 8 games for the Browns. So, an improvement as a passer and maintaining his rushing production, like as unlikely as it seems based on his time with the Browns, is at least within his realm of possibilities and basically necessary for him to deliver as a long shot dark horse QB1 candidate. So quickly looking at his QB1 checklist, he does have that history of 20 plus fantasy points per game. The high end rushing ability is also there. I put a no for above average passing ability just because it's been long enough that we've seen that from him that it wouldn't really be fair to call it otherwise, even if it is possible to get back there. Accuracy actually did meet that threshold, so that was good. And Amari Cooper, just like Terry McLaurin for Jaden Daniels, right on the fringe of that 90 plus receiving grade threshold that we're looking for. So there you have it. Those are my top 3 picks for 2024's fantasy dark horse QB1. Kyler Murray being our best shot, Jaden Daniels representing our medium shot, and Deshaun Watson being the long shot of the bunch. Let me know who your picks are in the comments based on this criteria. I'd love to hear them. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you enjoy this type of content. I've also written up the dark horse pick, my dark horse picks for all positions on pff.com, which you can check out now. I appreciate you all, and until next time, peace out.